understand how to do that, please start that too.
Yeah, the recording has started.
Excellent.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the monthly roundtable discussion of Council for Strategic Affairs. My name is Dr. Adityanjee,
Here now.
and I'm the president of the Council for Strategic Affairs. You see our logo there, and those of you who registered on True Karma link probably saw this flyer. Today is Saturday, May 9th. It is 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time here in US, and it is 7:30 p.m. in India. The topic for discussion today is very pertinent to geoeconomics and geopolitics. It is free trade areas and comprehensive economic partnership agreements, benefits and pitfalls. It is a general topic, not specific to one country or one particular agreement. So we will be discussing this in general. And this tells you the whole world, which is open now for trade. And of course, we are presumably working in a stage of globalization or partial globalization or something like that. A little bit about Council for Strategic Affairs. We impart education in the field of international relations. We foster discussion, dialogue, and debate on geopolitical issues. Council encourages strategic studies in general to raise the level of awareness. We condemn terrorism in all its forms worldwide. We aim to contribute towards world peace and prosperity. CSA promotes people-to-people contacts and track to diplomacy. For those who are based in US, please support us financially. We are a 501c3 organization registered with the IRS. The link for donation is on our website. We would like you to subscribe, like, and share our YouTube channel. We have several activities that include a monthly roundtable discussion, just like we are having today. It happens on second Saturday of each month, same time. A monthly guest lecture by a domain expert on fourth Saturday of each month. We have one-on-one interview called Strategically Speaking with Dr. Adityanjee. We organize meetings, symposia, conferences. We promote publication of articles on geopolitics and related subjects on our website. There is a fellowship training program in strategic studies. And currently we have two fellows, Rohit and Shubhi Malhotra. So again, request is to subscribe, like, and share our YouTube channel, and our US-based audience members kindly donate to CSA. Our distinguished panelists are very impressive today. Our first panelist is a young attorney based in Ahmedabad, Gujarat. Mayur Vyas is an advocate in Gujarat High Court with 12 years experience in corporate and international trade law. He currently specializes in free trade agreements and EU compliance procedures, import-export sector. He is interested in economic security, geopolitics, and strategic issues. He aims to transition into think tank role centered on economic statecraft. Our second panelist is Professor Seshadri Chari. He is a strategic thinker, journalist, author, and expert in geopolitics and international relations. He is Secretary General of a think tank called FINS. He is a member of Governing Council for Research and Information System, RIS. He has appeared on CSA platform before also. Today, he has some other conflicting engagement. He promised that he will join us a little bit late. Let's see what happens. And then we have our final distinguished panelist, Ambassador Dr. V.S. Seshadri, who joined the Indian Foreign Service in 1978 and served in several diplomatic posts, including Nairobi, Brussels, Tehran, Bangkok, Myanmar. He actually specializes in free trade areas, economic diplomacy and CEPAs. So I'm not going to read his wide resume verbatim line by line, but we are very honored to have him in today's discussion. So welcome to Ambassador Dr. V.S. Seshadri. A little bit about FTAs and CEPAs. I'm not going to talk more about it. Free trade agreement is a treaty between two countries to reduce or eliminate barriers in trade such as tariffs, quotas, duties, etc. In contrast to that, comprehensive economic partnership agreement is much more broad-based and it involves other areas besides the free trade. So I will leave it for our distinguished guests or panelists to talk about these nuances. So this is just a picture about free trade area. And this is an example of comprehensive progressive trans-Pacific partnership. It is a kind of multilateral CEPA. And this gives you for the RCEP, Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership Agreement, that India was party to negotiations but decided not to join. So these are some of the examples we'll be discussing. A little bit of housekeeping rules. Please stay muted throughout this roundtable discussion. Please change your cell phone to vibration mode. Please do not interrupt our esteemed panelists. Only those members of the audience who identify themselves will be allowed to ask questions. Questions are moderated through the chat room. Please be very specific and precise in asking questions. Don't write lengthy comments in the form of a monologue. This session is being recorded and we will have the recording available later on within next 24 hours. Again, we are registered as a 501c3 organization with Internal Revenue Service in United States as basically a think tank. So those who are based in US, please donate and financially support CSA. The link for donation is on our website. So without further ado, I am going to invite our youngest, brightest panelist, Mr. Mayur Vyas, Esquire, to give his opening statement. Every panelist will give a 7-minute opening statement, and then we will have discussion and question and answer. So Mayur, the platform is yours. Please go ahead.
Thank you so much, sir, for giving me this opportunity. Sir, the what I have studied and what I have understood is that this agreement CEPA under Article 24 of the General Agreement Trade and Tariff, the GATE 1994. So there is an exception of this GATE agreement, GATE provision, and through this exception, this free trade agreement can be can be made between the two countries. Usually what happens, the gate is meant for multilateral organization, multilateral countries, more than 3 or 4 countries, but there is an exception to this rule in Article 24 of the gate, that between two nations there can also be a free trade agreement. So what we are witnessing at present, between the India and many nations, the free trade agreement is only due to section Article 24 of the gate, so which empowers the countries to make agreement between to make that agreement, FTA. Now, sir, am I audible, sir?
Yes, you are audible. Go ahead.
Sir, now the important thing is that the competitiveness, or the what we say, the competitiveness. Once we enter into this kind of agreement, FTAs, we need to see, and I have observed that our export, instead of increasing our export, or they have declined and import have increased. So we need to think on our FTAs. We need to introspect, be whether FTAs are in the interest of our country or not. Now the second, the other part is that once we entered into the FTA with with so many countries, the burdens come from the exporters. How can they be made more competitive, keeping in mind this global competition? So competitiveness of exporters is sine qua non when we draft or when we enter into the free trade agreements. So this is what I think this is what I want, and will be enough to start with.
Thank you, Mayur, for your kind introduction. Now I'm going to invite Professor Seshadri Chari, who has joined us. And we are very thankful to Professor Seshadri Chari because he had a conflicting, very important meeting, but he decided to join us for a few minutes. So Professor Chari, kindly give your opening statement. Kindly turn your camera on as well, sir.
Thank you. Thank you. I have a problem because I am working from low intensity connectivity here. I'm
So
going to
it's
get
okay
a better
if you can't use
connectivity.
the camera, that's perfectly fine.
Yeah, so I'm not going to use my camera. But if you can give me, I mean, like if you can pass on, I mean, if you can go to Ambassador Kapoor or any other speaker for a moment, I can probably be better connected after another 10 minutes. Would you prefer to do that?
Okay, we can do that. I can invite
Please.
Ambassador Vyas Seshadri to give his opening statement, and then you can join as the last one.
Oh, sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
Ambassador Seshadri.
Thank you very much for inviting me to this forum and for this particular panel discussion. First of all, FTAs help forge closer economic integration between countries. FTAs also carry geopolitical overtones. So you have to be therefore selective in choosing FTA partners. A degree of trust and mutual understanding are essential. The possible drivers behind FTA making could be economic complementarity, closer regional cooperation, providing economic scale. When two countries combine, they provide scale, and providing easier access to certain markets. However, moreover, with WTO not presently involved in any tariff negotiations, FTAs provide the only option for tariff liberalization. And currently, global trade rules are being sidelined by one trade major. Another trade major is relentlessly pursuing manufacturing concentration. So, de-risking from this uncertain trade environment is yet another reason for third countries to pursue FTA linkages amongst themselves. Now, that being the reasons why there are still growing numbers of FTAs, not only by India, but also by EU, UK, UAE, Australia, Indonesia, and so on. If you see in recent years, they have been forging number of agreements. While we can have a full day conference on the benefits and pitfalls of FTAs, I would rather call it not pitfalls. I would urge that benefits and possible areas where we need to exercise caution. That is what I would put it as. I will list 5 of them, each on a different aspect, and then of course we can discuss. The first aspect, the benefit is FTAs provide greater predictability and stability, which is very, very important for international trade. In market access, the applied rate becomes the base rate and not the bound rate. Because bound rate is the commitment of the WTO, but if you enter into an FTA, it is the applied rate that becomes the reference rate. And tariff commitments, most often tariff elimination, bring that predictability in the partners market. Of course, this also means that in your own market, you lose flexibility to go up to the bound rate, which is why you will need to be very careful in structuring tariff commitments, taking into account your need for future policy space. Two aspects are important here. You need to have in place a good safeguard mechanism. Second, you need to have a rules of origin tailored to your exports. In the early days of our FTA making, for example, in some of our FTAs, we provided 35% minimum value addition for gem and jewelry. Now, gem and jewelry is an item where you cannot think of 35% value addition. These are high cost items. So which in recent FTAs, you will find this has been modified to 6% value addition. So you can see we are also learning from earlier mistakes. Similarly, the rules of origin in some of our earlier FTAs for shrimps and fish items called for wholly produced in the country. But we found that it needed a preservative that was important. So this was there in our CEPA with Japan, and it needed a lot of subsequent effort to change it. So I am saying again, I'll highlight another point of caution that is required. The second benefit from an FTA is the level playing field it offers to the exporter and the foreign competitor, a foreign partner that already has FTAs with many other partners. For example, FTA with the EU became very important because countries like Vietnam, Singapore, Indonesia, just to name a few, already have FTAs with the European Union. So also countries like Bangladesh and LDC and a few other countries get GSP treatment in the EU. So for our exporters to get a level playing field in the EU, it was very, very important therefore that we get an FTA with the European Union. But you also need to be careful in ensuring that for all the products of your interest, the FTA gives you the level playing field and they are not excluded. So this is the area of caution that you have to look for. The third benefit that can be is from freeing non-trade tariff barriers. For example, in the latest FTA signed with New Zealand and a few other countries earlier, India has put in place a mechanism for fast tracking of approvals from some of the competitive regulators like US FDA or European Medicines Agency for our pharmaceutical exports, which are an important segment of India's exports today. But the concern here is that some FTA partners could use these non-tariff barriers for protectionist purposes or for demanding unacceptable compliance requirements. European Union CBAM, Carbon Border Adjustment Mechanism, clearly falls in this category. And what is more, there are now proposals in the European Union to also include some downstream products within this fold. So constantly they are expanding this quickly. In any case, if there are problems that get created on market access because of such new non-tariff barriers, there has to be a rebalancing mechanism introduced in the FTA to ensure review of market access as and when it happens. A fourth benefit is the more assured access in an FTA on the services sector, as also on regulation on services. Mutual recognition of qualifications or licenses for professionals to offer services in the FTA partners country is another key element, be it relating to accountancy, architecture, nursing, etc. Of course, it will be best if all this can be done in the original FTA package itself, rather than leaving it for later negotiations, which are seen as then further concessions. Getting commitments on movement of professionals and also having a bilateral social security agreement is very, very important. India has got this done in the CEPAs done with Japan and the UK. But some trends in the services sector, like committing to a negative list approach in taking commitments, agreeing ratcheting, or MFN provisions need extreme caution. Some policy space needs to be kept aside for a new service also that may not be possible now, but which may be possible later, I mean, due to AI, quantum, whatever. So these are things that you have to foresee and keep aside some policy space. There are also now demands on digital trade that impinge on data security, data privacy issues. They again need to be handled with great caution. A fifth area of possible benefit and also need for caution are demands on WTO plus commitments in areas like intellectual property or on non-trade issues like labor, environment, gender, human rights, and so on. India had earlier opposed their inclusion, but in recent times, India is showing flexibility, but get commitments on them at an aspirational level, not subject to dispute settlement. This is the way I think we need to move forward. Finally, free trade agreements are only enabling tools. Benefiting fully from them requires an export strategy, and also it requires adjustments to be made where there could be sectors which may get potential losses because of the competitors entering your market. So that again has to be an important aspect. India is now entering into more FTAs. In the last 1 year itself, we have entered into FTA with UK, Oman, European Union, and New Zealand being the latest to be signed. We are also negotiating with more countries. It will be very, very important for Indian exporters to devise suitable product upgradation and market promotion strategies to secure optimal gains. Attracting and facilitating investments again could help push win-win opportunities. Thank you very much. Not able to hear you.
I don't know if anybody is speaking. Dr.
Yeah.
Adityanjee? Yeah. I can hear you, Dr. Ambassador Seshadri. Pradeep Kapoor, yeah. Dr. Adityanjee, are you there?
Ambassador Kapoor, can you take over, please?
Yeah, sure. So,
Thank you.
I'm sorry, I was muted during Dr. Seshadri's talk. I am very thankful to Dr. Seshadri. I'm sorry that I was muted. Professor Seshadri Chari, would you like to make your presentation now? Professor Seshadri Chari. Okay, we will invite Ambassador Kapoor to make his comments now. Ambassador Kapoor.
yeah, thank you so much. Let me start my video. Okay, I'm traveling in a car, so the signal may get disrupted a little bit, but I'm sure that Dr. Seshadri will be able to join in a minute, and because I can see his video on. If you want to continue with Dr. Seshadri,
I think let's do that because his time is a little bit challenged.
yes.
So Professor Seshadri Chari, kindly go ahead. And we will come back to
Thank you, Mr. Aditya. Actually, I just got jumped out of another meeting. Maybe I can stay with you for another 15-20 minutes. It shouldn't be a problem.
That'll be
sure.
perfectly
Thank you so much. Thank you for your understanding. As you are aware, We are in the midst of government formation in Tamil Nadu, my state, and there are a lot of hiccups that are coming up. Anyway, I won't keep you from all that. And I must also appreciate that you have Ambassador Seshadri, my namesake. In fact, he was our former vice chairman of RIS, and he is an author of a very well-known book on FTA. So, I mean, it's absolutely impossible for me to say anything besides what he has already said, because he is one of the finest experts on FTA and CEPA in the entire country, rather. So, I take a cue from what he said. India's engagement with FTA is very important because, there is a very major change as far as geopolitics is concerned. We are passing through a time when we cannot divorce geopolitics from geoeconomics. So if you see the basic feature, the core principle of geopolitics, it has changed from a bipolar world during the Cold War to a unipolar world after the dissolution of former Soviet Union. And from unipolar world, it has become what we can now call a multipolar world. Of course, from 91 to 95, 96, America was the only country that mattered as far as economics is concerned, but no longer. Then entered the space that was vacated by Russia, USSR, rather I would say, Soviet Union, was taken over by China. But it took China almost 10 to 15 years to fill that gap to a very large extent. But when China filled that gap created by the vacation of USSR, it filled more than just the gap. It brought in technology, it brought in international trade, it brought in international financial structures, and it also brought in what we call a tight control over economy and statecraft, which we cannot match. No democracy can match what China could do in those 15 years. There was a time when the power of the country was determined by the amount of geography that it could hold. That was during the First World War, when Great Britain was a very big power because it had more colonies. After that came a period where what mattered the most was not the colonies, but your firepower, your military power, your destructive power. Mutually assured destruction, MAD, was what determined your power status. But after 1995, what is determining the power of country is economics. How many countries you have as far as trade is concerned. And that is where China changed the strategy, and China also changed the landscape of international economics. They did not hold any colony. They never colonized any country. They did not become an aggressor in any country, but they created what is called the One Belt, One Road scheme, the BRI, which connected 75 countries of the world. They provided cheap loans. They did business with people. They did business with countries. They developed countries. They provided a huge amount of infrastructure. So this changed the whole world's economic system. And what was a very small, usually left to the Western world, became the most important tool in the hands of countries like India, which represented the South-South cooperation. That is where, in the last about 10 years, India very seriously started thinking in terms of FTA, and they have now, probably I should say, India has mastered the art of getting into FTA agreements with different countries. As Ambassador Seshadri very rightly pointed out, there were several agreements that we have signed, including the one with the European Union, which is called the mother of all trade. Now, we are still negotiating almost as many as 12 more FTAs, And the most important element as far as these FTAs are concerned is, in a situation as which we are facing today, our exports have actually been greatly negatively impacted exports. So this is the time when we are facing two very major issues. One is, of course, the negative exports, and another is a huge tariff punishment. US has imposed a very big tariff on us. Even a small country like Nepal tried to impose tariff. Of course, we said we will suffer the most. So they finally withdrew the tariff. But nevertheless, we are facing these problems. So at a time when we are facing tariff problems, at a time when we are facing export problems, this is the best way to deal with the rest of the world. The FTA model is one of the best model. That is what we are now doing. Now, our focus on trade agreement is like to change the economy primarily by increasing by changing the domestic demand to international demand. There is an international demand, but at the same time, what India has the best advantage of two things. One, India can produce for the entire world, and India can consume what the entire world produces. These two advantages India has got. So if we can produce what the world, if we can consume what the world produces, we can also produce for what the world wants. So any country under the sun can benefit from India's production facilities. But of course, FTAs are not very easy to negotiate, and FTAs are not very easy to implement also. Because as a developing economy, we have certain constraints as far as production is concerned, and as far as consumption is concerned, and as far as imports are concerned. More importantly, we will have to, when we are providing a level playing field, we cannot look into only the imports and other countries, but we have also to look into what we call the domestic production process. And as we all know, in the recent elections, if you see, the major suffering of the existing political parties, be it Tamil Nadu, incidentally, I'm telling you, Tamil Nadu's industrial growth has been one of the best industrial growth in the last 5 years in all compared to all other states. But still, the ruling party lost, not because of its good economics, not because of its good policies, economic policies, but because the MSME sector suffered the most. And MSME sector in India is the lifeline of opportunity for jobs. That is the entity that provides maximum jobs. So if that is what going to happen, there will be a political price that the governments will have to pay. So signing an FTA and carrying forward an FTA, implementing an FTA is probably economically a game changer, but politically it could cut the political future of any party both ways. So one has to be very careful, and that is, I think, where the government is playing a very prudent, they are taking very prudent steps. And another area where we have already discussed, Ambassador Seshadri also mentioned those points, as to the delay in signing FTA with USA. That is mainly because of certain roadblocks that US has created. As far as India is concerned, we are still open to all kinds of negotiations, and we are open to, we are always sitting there in the negotiating table. It is for US to see the reality of the situation and come up with ideas that could circumvent the problems that we are facing as far as these things are concerned. And more importantly, what I have to say is that as far as FTAs are concerned, we have what we call the trade deficit issue. So we will be facing a huge amount of trade deficit if we are not able to trade with any country with whom we sign an FTA and unable to match the exports to that country. And that is exactly one fear that those who are negotiating FTAs have, this radically means that we will have to improve our manufacturing sector. The one thing that we have not done in the last 50, 60 years is radicalize the manufacturing sector. Our emphasis has been on job creation. Our emphasis has not been on industrial automation. If we have to be competitive in the world, we have to have an industrial automation system, and all industries, especially the core industries, steel, cement, aluminium, and even to some extent mining, have to accept the fact that if you don't go in for a massive automation, you will not be able to compete with world on quality, quantity, and process effectiveness. So these are all some of the problems, but the government is very much aware of these issues also. But nevertheless, FTAs are going to be the future as far as the Indian economy is concerned, and even the world economy is concerned. In a multilateral world, trade cannot be only bilateral. Trade has also got to be multilateral. And FTAs and CEPAs are the only routes through which we can approach the entire world as far as economy is concerned. And that is what we are doing. So I really appreciate you for bringing up this subject at a very right time. And I can now continue for another 5 minutes. And then once my meeting bosses call me, I will rush in probably. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Professor Chari. I really appreciate your willingness to participate. Now we invite Ambassador Pradeep Kapoor to give his comments. Ambassador Kapoor.
Thank you very much, Dr. Adityanjee. It has been absolutely a pleasure to listen to my former colleague, Ambassador Seshadri, with whom one has had close association in the Foreign Service, and also to the other two distinguished speakers, including Professor Seshadri Chari and Mayur Vyas. What I would like to say is that, I look at it from the concept of three aspects. Firstly, in terms of the current global situation, FTAs, CEPAs, globalization versus bilateral trade versus most favored nation, etc., etc., and how it has been topsy-turvy completely. Traditionally, we had the initial starting point as bilateral trade, whereby you would think of it as partial trading agreements, whereby you would put in quite a significant number of items on the list and do some significant reductions on tariffs and non-trade barriers, and also give most favored nation status, and then you would expand that to the PTA, the PTA to the FTA, which would be the free trade area. And from the free trade area, you would add on other items, such as, for example, the mobility of the people, the immigration, the goods and services aspects, and thereafter you would enter into a comprehensive economic partnership agreement, which was CEPA or a SECA, comprehensive economic cooperation agreement. So that would also then get further expanded into strategic partnerships. And on the other hand, there would be other emerging sort of collaborations in these multilateral regimes, which would result in something like what we have in the ASEAN or what we have in the European Union, whereby you merge the currency also, you sort of bring down the borders, the frontiers, the barriers, the customs, the trading, you apply uniform rates of tariffs, etc., etc. And thereafter, you also unify your policies to a very great extent to make them coherent. And for example, or a European embassy, for example. So those are the extremes to which you could reach later with a flag and with a parliament and with elections across Europe, etc. But what has happened currently with the sort of very arbitrary tariff regime which has been implemented mostly by the US. I sit here in the US, I work out of Washington, D.C., so it's a great pleasure for me to see firsthand how things are being changed completely. The rules of the game are being completely turned topsy-turvy, and now new rules are emerging which were never envisioned earlier, or which could never have been thought of earlier. So today you have by tweet, for example, during my days when I was ambassador in Chile, for example, when we decided to move from a PTA to an FTA, and thereafter from a FTA to a CEPA, it involved massive amounts of study, understanding, negotiations, consultations with the industry bodies, consultations with the civil society, which were very, very extensive and very long drawn out. And you had to also consult with the stakeholders very actively, like the farming community, like the dairy community, like the pharmaceutical industry, like the other industries, segments, auto parts, etc., etc. So that extensive, intensive consultations would help us to arrive at some sort of understanding as to how to proceed on how to expand from a PTA to an FTA to a CEPA, etc. But today, when you change tariffs by tweets, it's a whole new ball game altogether, and we have to understand how to deal with this. I think India has done quite well in terms of its negotiations with the US. It needs to just stay calm, stay peaceful, because ultimately it's US which will realize that if it has to continue operating in a way that it has economic development, it has economic growth, it needs partners like India, and it will come to India and agree to Indian sensitivities, Indian concerns, Indian interests, also to a very great extent, and not just keep on arbitrarily deciding on some level of tariff which has no basis in argument or reason or rationality. I will stop here because I would much rather go on to the question answer. But thank you very much, Dr. Adityanjee. It's a very opportune time that you have set this up, and it's a very beautiful subject to discuss. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Ambassador Kapoor. You started with PTAs. Just for sake of our audience, PTA actually is more like not partial trade agreement, but preferential trade.
Preferential trade. That is good. Thank
PTA
you.
to FTA to FTA to CEPA and CECA, whatever one may call. I have a question for Ambassador Seshadri. Now, one of the important presumptions, fundamental presumptions for signing an FTA is that there will be a rules-based order. There will be consistency so that two countries can trade in a framework that is stable. The industries, the exporters know what the rules are. Now, I use the word pitfalls. There is a reason for that. You sign a FTA, bilateral FTA with country X or country Y, and the rules of the game change. And as Ambassador Kapoor was saying, that tariffs by tweets starts, and the whole environment is different. Are you advised to sign an FTA under those fluid international geopolitical and geoeconomic situations? Let's talk in hypothetical, not country specific issues.
Thank you for that question. I think you are referring to the US, which signed its last FTA, I think in 2011. It has subsequently got out of TPP, which it participated in negotiations, and managed to amend NAFTA into what it calls US-Mexico-Canada Agreement. But it has since 2011 not entered into any new FTAs, and there is little appetite bipartisan in the US for any further free trade agreements. President Trump's administration, the second one, is talking about trade agreements, but they are not free trade agreements. And they are not subject to Article 24 that Mr. Mayur referred to earlier. This is very one-sided. In fact, he is increasing the tariff or calling them reciprocal tariff for the partner countries, while USA itself will expect zero tariff on the other part. So this is a very, very asymmetric negotiation, simply using the leverage of the large market that US provides. That's a very different kind of trade environment. So what the rest of the world is trying to do, as I said earlier in my introduction, there are two trade measures today. One is the largest importer, that is the US, which is going its own way. Another is the largest exporter, China, which is focused on manufacturing concentration. And you see that only rising, not reducing. And China is also not vacating sector. So what do the rest of the countries do? I think in this environment, which is very uncertain, what they are trying to do, as I can infer, and as I mentioned to you, that some of the other economies like EU, like Indonesia, like UAE, like India, and so on, are trying to see if they can stabilize trade with other countries and have more definitive free trade agreements arrangements. That is in accordance with Article 24 of WTO rules, etc. So this is how it is proceeding. We have to wait and see if what happens vis-a-vis US does have an impact on the others also. This is quite possible. I don't rule that out. How will they be dealt with? Remains to be seen. But as of now, I think what the other countries are trying to do, if they can at least provide greater predictability, certainty on trade amongst themselves.
Thank you, Ambassador Seshadri. Professor Chari, if you're there, would you like to address the same question that I asked Ambassador Seshadri?
Yes, that's actually a very important question. But generally what happens is, not every country behaves in a similar fashion. A larger economy, a bigger economy, which does not depend on FTAs to improve itself or to do trade with other countries of the world, they generally can get away with changing the rules of the game when the game is being played. But smaller countries cannot do it. So they will have to subject themselves to the rules and regulations of the World Trade Organization, and they generally do it. And there are several mechanisms to address these anomalies. But generally, it doesn't happen. So if you cannot, this is a very hypothetical question, as you mentioned. Therefore, we are not yet facing this kind of a problem. Even with a country like China, if when we have even bilateral relationships, even there, we don't face this problem. It's only with one particular country that India is facing this problem. Other countries are also facing the problem. And as Ambassador Seshadri very rightly said, that the US withdrew from TPP, and then suddenly they thought that it was a wrong decision, so they went back again. But if you have certain reservations, for example, India had certain reservations with RCEP. India was party to all the negotiations of RCEP. We attended all the meetings, but when it came to joining RCEP, we raised certain issues, and the RCEP was not ready to meet those issues. So India decided not to join RCEP. Probably we will still negotiate with RCEP and try and find a way out of it. But once you join RCEP, you cannot say that I joined on these conditions, now these conditions are not fulfilled, so I am quitting, or you accept my new conditions. You cannot put new conditions after the game has started. You have to decide the conditions of the game before it starts.
Very well said, Professor Chari, that you cannot change the rules of the game once the process has started. But we did see it in NAFTA versus USMCA or CUSMA or whatever it was called, and now even that is not adhered to. So some of these economic or trade agreements are not worth the paper they are written on, and one has to, if you represent a country which is not a hyperpower, economic hyperpower, then you do need to take into consideration what you're signing at. It raises a lot of questions. A country is forcing you to open up certain sectors where there is cultural resistance in dairy sector, in GMOs. Are you advised to sign an FTA under those conditions? Because once you sign on this, the expectation is that we will use a crowbar to open the door. And I'm being very serious here. You have analogy to opium trade between Imperial Britain and China, in which Imperial Britain forced a kind of trade agreement which was one way selling opium from manufactured in India to China. Are we seeing a simile here? And that is the question to the three of my distinguished panelists. Anyone can join.
Ambassador Seshadri should be able to answer this question better.
Now, you see, certainly USA has turned an outlier in terms of respect for WTO rules or even for the bilateral agreements it signed itself. In fact, even the USMCA, which the Trump 1 administration signed, now there are questions about it, and they have no second thoughts violating some of the provisions. So that is a unique case, and that will have to be dealt with separately. I don't think we'll have to hypothetically look at what could impact us in future. We do not know. But the important point is USA is insisting on using its market as a leverage for forcing countries to open. We have to take a decision. So countries are, in each case, they are weighing it carefully in terms of what is it they can, kind of agree to. And of course, it also depends what the other countries get. For example, when we reached a framework agreement, we were given a reciprocal tariff of 18%, which was slightly less than what was given to some of our competitor countries in Southeast Asia, which was 19%, 20%, etc. So there was, in trade, you have to weigh these things. You can go by principles, but you also have to weigh what are the alternatives. So we thought we will go ahead with it. But of course, subsequently, the Supreme Court judgment has come, and we do not know still where it will all end up. But the simple point is this: here, as of now, USA is dealing with it very differently, and we will have to carefully see what is the way forward, and that our negotiators, I am sure, we are doing that. But on the other hand, I think there is every very good reason for us to proceed with FTA making with other countries, so that at least with others we have a more predictable, stable set of rules for trade making, and that is the way to proceed. I don't think there is any third alternative at the moment available. Thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador Seshadri, for your comments. Professor Chari wants to jump in.
I think Professor Ambassador Seshadri mentioned a very important point about the size of the market. If US can afford to behave in a particular manner for two reasons. One is, of course, the size of the market, and another is the value of the dollar. So when it comes to these two aspects, US has a greater leverage, but US also should remember that the size of US market is not as big as the size of the market of the rest of the world put together. For example, if India decides to deal only with EU and India feels that it is not comfortable to deal with the US, what happens? India still would be able to do much better as far as its exports are concerned, and India would still be in a much better position as far as the imports are concerned. Because as far as technology is concerned, there are only two things in technology. We depend on US technology, no doubt about it, but there are now other countries which have come up with technology. Therefore, US does not have that kind of a hold over technology which it used to have about 25-30 years back. Some of the most modern technologies that we use today are all founded by the US because of its emphasis on research and development, which the rest of the countries lacked very much for want of enough capital to deploy in research and development, but no longer so. Today, China is far ahead of technology in some of the areas. I won't say China is ahead of US technology in all areas, but China is certainly better in some technologies. Russia is better in certain technologies. There are European Union countries which are now better in as far as hydrogen technology is concerned. So as far as availability of technology is concerned, India has the option of pick and choose. No longer we have to depend on one country for technology. So this US negotiators also are aware of, and they are very, very cautious about it. But of course, the political aspect and the negotiating aspects are different. But as Ambassador Seshadri very rightly put it, these two leverages are in favor of US, but they may not continue to be a very effective leverage for a long time. So one has to be very careful in using a leverage which may not accrue the same kind of benefit after say 2 years or 3 years.
Very
Thank
well
you.
said, Professor Chari. Ambassador Seshadri wants to join in. Please go ahead.
The only point I would like to add here, the India-US negotiations
Hmm.
were wavering for several months. And then what happened in the month of January, we concluded the EU FTA.
Correct.
That was the tipping point. So USA concluded that it cannot be left behind. So that was a dynamic which played, I feel, in USA coming back and agreeing to the joint framework agreement. So you have to play carefully. There are leverages, and see how we can take it forward. I will stop there.
Thank you very much indeed, Ambassador Seshadri, Professor Chari, and Mr. Mayur Vyas for participating in this roundtable discussion. As the moderator of this discussion, I have certain editorial advantages, so I will just speak out those things. The problems are not just with two economic hyperpowers. There are other problems also. And we have focused actually on one aspect. There is another aspect that one particular power restricting access to certain monopolized trade in rare earths or minerals on secondary ground. So not only you are seeing punishment tariffs by tweets, you are also seeing other geopolitical influences affecting the trade decisions, whether it is for country X or country Y. So we need to be aware of that. We had a situation that original equipment manufacturer of tunnel boring equipment who outsourced the manufacturing to a world's factory had no leverage in exporting that equipment to a third country because of these geopolitical issues. So the current fluid international situation is posing a lot of changes. And yes, sometimes they are related to political situations. And when you have waited for almost 1.5 years, you might as well wait for another 6 months till the political situation stabilizes or there are new insights. My only concern is that don't sign FTA blindly. Wait, see what you're getting. Sometimes it's better to be patient and not rush into an agreement. And there are strategies like WTO -1, WTO -2, WTO -3. And I think you need to use those kind of strategies to diversify trade and preferential access to all the technologies, services, and everything. Ultimately, each country decides what is in its national interest. And that should be the fundamental mantra of signing any FTA or any bilateral CEPA with any country. With those remarks, I'm going to end this roundtable discussion. Very pleased that we had a very fruitful discussion. And when we have the recording of this particular roundtable discussion available, we will share with all of you, as well as put on our YouTube channel, as well as our website. Thank you very much indeed to all the participants, including Ambassador Pradeep Kapoor, who is our resident commentator as member of our International Advisory Board, very supportive, mentoring all our, younger colleagues. So thank you to all of you. Namaste.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. And Mayur, I look forward to connecting with you separately.
Okay.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, doctor. Thank you,
Thank
Ambassador.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you, Professor.
Thank you very much.
Bye.